round of Talk the Talk with Valueabled. I'm Jerry Johnson and I will be your host for today. And with me here on Google Hangout is Mr. Tarun Das, a stalwart of Indian industry. So let me introduce Mr. Das briefly. Mr. Das is a founding trustee of Aspen Institute in India. He has spent his professional career in the development and promotion of Indian industry during his tenure as a Director General of the CII, which stands for the Confederation of Indian Industry. He has received the Padma Bhushan in 2006, one of the highest civilian awards for his contribution in the field of trade and industry. His leadership of the CII over the 3 decades has strengthened business and strategic ties between India and the world. In the current social and political scenario, we hear the word leadership being thrown around a lot, and it has become most relevant to understand what this word means in the advent of the 2014 elections. So I thank you, Mr. Das, for joining us to discuss this very nature of leadership that is driven by values and ideals. And Valueabled is proud to be associated with Aspen India. Aspen Institute India has been successfully grooming several young leaders and continues to nurture a generation of future thought leaders and knowledge leaders. So Values in Leadership is a platform to inspire change and motivate young leaders, is one such product of this partnership that we hope to achieve with Aspen India. So Mr. Das, first I'll begin with asking you, what are some of the overall goals and objectives of Aspen India and how did you come about associated with it?
Thank you, Jerry. I'd be happy to do that. First of all, thank you for reading out my obituary notice. Did you get that?
No. That's not what I do.
Yeah, maybe you can paragraph that to one line. You know, I was saying to you before we got on this conversation that 20 years ago I went to Aspen Institute, Colorado, with a bunch of people, Jamshid Godrej from Bombay, Kedo Bhargav, chairman of Maruti, and a few others, just to figure out what does Aspen Institute in USA do. And we found this amazing process where they bring people together from different segments of society, academics, corporates, people from the voluntary sector, government, scientists, etc., to discuss specific issues and try to build shared understanding of that issue. And the other thing we found was they have training programs for leadership, young people, but also older people, leadership with values, but there is no teaching. There's a moderator and they give you stuff to read, and it is that reading which is discussed amongst the group. And by the way, there's never more than 20 people around the table because they want it to be interactive. And so they'll give you a reading of Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King, and the facilitator is asking questions so that he or she enables you to discuss what have you understood from that reading, and out of that comes really a life-changing experience. And we felt we must bring that to India, you know, because both these things that they do seem very relevant to India. The third thing they do is on foreign policy, engaging institutions in other countries, building bilateral relationships, trilateral relationships, and we do that also here. We do that with 6 countries. We started with the US in 2002, but now it's extended to China, Japan, Turkey, Israel, and Singapore. So This is what Aspen India does in brief.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that the idea is to bring about a shared understanding. Would you like to enumerate some of maybe the core fundamental ideals that motivate Aspen India and which therefore you would like to translate into the larger leadership culture of India?
Sure. Let's take integrity for an example.
Okay.
And these seminars actually discuss readings about integrity or lack of integrity, and you have this huge debate and almost sometimes a fist fight on what is integrity, how do you practice integrity, what is not integrity, and all of that, which is so relevant to our country, by the way.
Certainly.
It always has been, but even more so right now. So that's one specific issue I can mention to you. The other one is, what is an institution? Is every NGO an institution? Is a business organization an institution? what are the characteristics of an institution and what is not an institution. You know, like it's a one-man show. Is it an institution? Should an institution have disbursed ownership and participation? You know, all these issues. How does the institution function? Do they have a broader membership that they pull in, or they don't have? What are the issues that they take up? So they take up issues which are relevant to society, and I think that brought a lot of value to us.
But Mr. Das, do you think it's difficult to sell the idea that here we take a group of leaders, put them in a room, and make them read articles about the Mahatma and articles on, you know, some famous philosopher like Plato or Socrates, and then make them go out into the business world, and they're like, how do you apply Plato to my profit and loss sheet? So do you ever find that as a challenge, selling them the idea?
No, absolutely. No, the first is selling them the idea to come and sit in that room and interact with other people. By the way, it's always a diverse group, and always we are aiming for gender balance, so that there are almost an equal number of men and women in the room, because we do want different perspectives in that room. So it's difficult first to tell people and persuade them to come and try this. The second part is not so difficult, because people come back to us and say, this was a life-changing experience. Because it's not for half a day or a 1 day. It's a 4 to 5 day session, and it is spread over several months, you know, with project work to be done in between, etc. So by and large, I would say 90% of the people who've been through the process say it's changed them, and they want to give back to the society, they want to give back to community, and they want to do things differently from the way they did it before. So our success rate, our hit rate has been very good.
Okay. And you've not had any difficulty trying to create an applicability of these values or these ideas with business culture?
See, we are not in the police business, so we are not monitoring what they're doing. But when people say this, and by the way, we have an annual reunion of these people. They come back, they give a feedback on what they've been doing or what they've not been doing. They share what has worked for them and what has not worked for them. The general feeling, that the general understanding we have it, that people do try when they go out there to do it on the basis of what they learned in the Aspen programs. We have an Inspector General of Police in Uttar Pradesh, of all places, right? Who's been through the program. We've had foreign service officers, we were district magistrates, you know, apart from, of course, a lot of NGO heads and all. But you get a feeling that it has been very transformational for each of them in a nice way.
Right. So then how do you make this now relevant to younger people? Now, younger people and philosophy, they think philosophy is for gurus, and when they think philosophy, they think Osho. So how do you connect that?
Now, the people who are going through this young leadership program are below the age of 40. All right. So they could be anywhere from the late 20s to 40, who are already showing signs of achievement of some kind, showing signs of leadership. And this is to hone those skills further. The next thing that we have started last year is a leadership program for school kids from the classes of 9 to 12. So the last few years in school. It's a 2-week residential program in Rishikesh. And the idea came to us from the late Mrs. Manju Bharatram, who used to run and was the chair of the Shriram School in Delhi. And she said, what you're doing for these little older boys and girls, or men and women, can we start inculcating those values into kids before they leave school? And so we had 28 boys and girls in Rishikesh in a residential program in the peak of summer, end of May. And this year, 28 went to 56. So we doubled the number. By the way, every kid, the parents pay for this. This is not free. And we charge for this because just to cover our costs. And again, we've had extremely good feedback from the children. And each day of the 2 weeks that they were there, two of the children would write the report or the diary for that day, and that would be circulated to all the other kids, to their parents, to the faculty, and all of that. And we could see that we were making an impact. How long will it last? Will it last forever? Time will have to tell. But we have a process of continuing the connection. It doesn't break at the end of 2 weeks. So we keep the relationship going, we keep the communication going, so that there's a network being built of like-minded boys and girls.
Right. But sometimes do you not, how do you encounter this criticism that you might be preaching to the choir by kind of selecting anyway those who are at the forefront of their fields, anyway who have a lot of personal initiative and drive, whereas the great masses need to still be motivated by something that sparks their mind, that ignites their passions. So are you not kind of limiting yourself to those who anyway would succeed in life?
No, very, very good point, and a very important point which occurred to us. So this year we brought in 2 Muslim girls from Kashmir. Now that's a troubled part of the country.
Right.
The young people are troubled, but we wanted to reach out and bring people from there. So we've started, 3 Muslim girls, 3 girls came from Kashmir. In addition to that, we had 1 or 2 children from government schools, not the Sri Ram school, not the Vasant Valley, not the cathedrals and all of that, but actually from completely a different strata of society, because we wanted to see how the integration would go, how they would connect with each other. And I must share with you, it was a terrific success, and it really went well. And these so-called, you can call them rich kids, or you can call them the kids who are better off, and the kids who are not well off, they did actually connect, they did integrate, and there were no issues there. So we are going to enlarge that number of children who come, who cannot, by the way, pay. So we give them scholarships to come on the program. They are selected through a process, but it's very worthwhile, and we are going to extend that. And eventually, maybe, it'll be 50-50. We are reaching out to corporate sector and foundations to sponsor more children from government schools, more children from places like Kashmir, so that we can integrate all of them.
Okay. Like I've read on the Aspen India website that a lot of the activities kind of also focus on, getting people to become leaders, right?
Yeah.
Because apparently there is a leadership deficit.
Yeah.
Do you also believe there is some value in having a followership that maybe has a certain sense of what should, for example, if you have your 2014 elections and you have 2 leaders competing, do you not think the people need to also be aware of how to pick their leaders? What are the kind of values to look for? So how do you kind of balance the needs of having a followership that is also aware, that also has ideals, and only grooming leaders?
Well, we're not there yet, Jerry. We'll have to do that, but we're not there yet. So we'll have to wait for that. Let's see if we can build what we think is, if we can build 1,000 young leaders with similar values, actually even 100 can change this country. You don't need an army of people. So we are focusing on that, building young leaders with values. We started with this late 20s to 40 age group. We've extended it now to school kids. We have a separate program for older people who are above 40, which is again everything is a residential program. So there's a lot of time spent with each other, and a lot of time understanding and building relationships. Because we found when you build relationships, the world looks very different after that.
That's true.
So the friendships and the relationships make a big difference. So we are focused right there. We don't have the capacity to extend to followerships.
So, okay, well, besides integrity, which is one value that you pointed out, what are like maybe some other values of a leader?
Well, one is to be able to listen. We're all so good at talking, And we don't listen. A leader has to listen. That's one. A second one is a leader has to operate on trust, not on mistrust. One of the huge problems of this country in its whole growth process and its development process, that all our rules and our laws are based on mistrust. We've inherited a lot of this, from pre-independence days, but we've made it much more complicated. So a leader has to trust his people. And I have found that if you trust your people, 95% of those people will be fine. And if there are 4 or 5% who let you down, the averages are great for you. There'll always be 1 or 2 people who let you down. It doesn't matter. So listen, trust, and therefore give space to people. The people around you, the people who work with you, even your kids, if you have children, you have to give space. I mean, these are some basic, very common sense things to build leaders and also to operate as leaders. Trust, give space, listen. I mean, there are several other things. I once listed about 20 things which are qualities of a leader. You have to be decisive. You can't be a leader and not be willing to decide whether you go right or left, forward or backwards. I mean, one of the big problems right now that this country is facing, sometimes I feel, is just lack of decisions, lack of the indecision part keeps going, and then it just sort of, you're overwhelmed by the indecision on something. You have to be decisive, otherwise you're not a leader. Let me stop there.
No, no, please, you should continue as long as you want to. One of the qualities of a leader is to also listen, isn't it?
No, I want to listen.
Okay, so my follow-up question to that, you made a very good point about trust, and you're saying that there's currently a lot of trust deficit in the country, which is something many people are recognizing. But do you think sometimes leadership can also become overbearing when a leader does more, they do a lot more than is required rather than leaving people alone to make up their own decisions, be accountable for their own actions? So how do you recommend drawing a balance, and how do you maintain that balance?
I think the guy or the man or woman who is leading as if he or she is crucial, indispensable, it's all about him or her.
Right.
For me, that person is not a leader, not a true leader, not a sustainable long-term leader. And actually, I find people who want to lead that way, and that's a sort of over-centralized style of leading. I find those people are insecure, Jerry. They're actually, they're overdoing it because they're worried that if they, don't take care of everything and tie all the knots and dot all the I's and cross all the T's, things will go haywire. You can't keep it up. This guy will burn out. For me, he is not a true leader. The true leader is going to be someone who motivates other people, who gives space to them, trusts them, decides when decisions are required, but allows other people to decide also. And in fact, for me, one of the qualities is you build other leaders. If you're a real leader, if you can build other leaders. If it's all about yourself, you're not a great leader.
That's a very good point. But do you think India is ready for that model of leadership? Or do you think Indians would prefer to just follow somebody who gives them instructions and directions? Are we ready to have the Aspen Institute India's form of leadership?
I think we are ready. I think the talent in this country, the intelligence in this country, the common sense in this country, there's the innate sort of a wisdom in this country. You're ready, and you can trust your people. I mean, I think that we should try that way of running this country. It's too big to run it centrally. It's too big to run it from one leader. This country is about decentralized leadership. This is about decentralized development. If you want clean energy in this country, let's bring clean energy to clusters of villages. Don't try to do it top down. This country is not about only big thermal power stations and using massive coal. This is about using local materials and local resources at the village level. The Indian American scientists in America have just developed batteries to store power. Now, can you imagine, we're already getting that technology into India. Can you imagine what a transformation it would be for villagers, that these batteries would be installed in villages and they would store power so that they can get power at night. The kids can study at night, the women can cook at night, whatever you want to do, so that it'll be transformational. Now, this will be decentralized power. It's not going to be coming from 500 miles away at high cost. So for me, the way of moving ahead is much more local and much less national, and the national part must be to encourage and build local development and local institutions. That for me is the kind of leadership I would like to see. We don't have it yet.
Right, right. So Mr. Das, that sounds like the recipe for leadership in the political sphere. What are the kind of lessons or directions you would recommend for leaders in the corporate world, corporate leaders? How are they currently, and how would you prefer or wish that they turned out to be?
I think when I look at the corporates, and I've dealt with all of them for most of my life,
yes,
I think there are different styles of leadership. There is the very strong centralized style of some of the CEOs. There is the much more giving space to other people. I mean, let's take the Tata Group. All right,
sure.
100 companies. Ratan Tata was chairman for the last 20-25 years. But in spite of the media trying to focus only on Ratan Tata, I mean, people know that there's a Muthuraman who ran Tata Steel, and a Ravikant who ran Tata Motors, and a Mukundan who runs Tata Chemicals, and a Krishna Kumar who runs Tata Beverages, and a Bixen who runs Tata Hotels. These are all CEOs of their companies, and they're running those companies. It's not about Ratan Tata only. So for me, you can make mistakes in the process. But you'll make mistakes anyway. You're human. So we are all human. We've got to make mistakes. We should. By the way, a leader should not be afraid of making mistakes.
That's true.
That's another factor. So you trust people, you give space, you empower people, and that's what I see in that. Tatas have 100 leaders in Tatas because they're different people leading companies in the Tata Group at different levels and different sizes, and they move from one to the other. As they do well on a small company, they go to a bigger company and so forth. It's a little bit different from many other corporate models. So for me, that's a very good model of development in the corporate sector.
So when you have these sessions, the leadership seminars as part of the Aspen, do you find resistance from corporate leaders in terms of the ideas that you're sharing, some of the values that you're discussing? For example, each corporation, Future Group, or if you take the Sahara Group, or if you take any other, they have very strong internal corporate cultures, and they come with that. And I'm not sure if you've had them in any of your leadership seminars, but do you find different cultures clashing in these seminars?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Heated debate.
Yeah.
Heated debate. This is not the way. My way is the best way. Your way is not the right way. All that.
So how do you handle that?
Sometimes it comes to almost fighting with each other physically on that. That's part of the game. I mean, that's why they're in the room to build shared understanding.
So you were saying that these leaders come almost to fisticuffs. So
absolutely.
How do they come out of the room then after that?
Well, they come out. Some of them are convinced of the other person's style. Some of them are not convinced. It's part of the game. But it's a process. And usually, I think we come out with a broad consensus that, there are different ways of doing things apart from your own way.
Right. So you were saying that somehow or the other you managed to get a shared vision. But I'm still wondering what is that shared vision that they all come up with? So does a person from that culture say, okay, fine, I'm giving up, I'm changing my corporate culture, this is what the new leadership style is going to be? Have you had that kind of
Yeah,
transformations?
no, not always. Some people just go out of the room unconvinced that there is a
Uh-huh.
better way of doing things,
Hmm.
and they have not been open to the change, and they have defended their style of doing things. But some people change and said, I'm going to try something different tomorrow morning when I get back to office. So
Hmm.
it varies from person to
Hmm.
person, and
Hmm.
this is not about trying for 100% success, but this is
Right.
about trying. The most important thing is to try.
Certainly. Isn't, I think what one of Mahatma's quote is, you fight for the future and you live in it today.
That's right.
So I think essentially if you don't try, you're not even like
Yeah.
living in that space that you're looking to. Um, my last few questions. What do you see the association of Valueabled with the Aspen? What are your expectations on that front? How is it going to go? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I hope that this association between Valueabled and Aspen India will create a continuing forum
Hmm.
on first values, because we see a huge lack of values in the world generally, but specifically in India. And I want to, we want to focus a lot on younger people because they are going to lead in the future. Many of
Hmm.
them, this is a young country. Many young people are leading already. I always say in my remarks to in audiences that there's an explosion of entrepreneurship in this country. There's an
Hmm.
explosion of young entrepreneurship. Young people don't necessarily now want to work for someone else. They want
Hmm.
to do their own thing, you know, because
True.
that enables them to flower in their personality and bloom and take leadership in that.
Hmm.
So we want to bring those people into the network of Valueabled and Aspen India and see
Hmm.
if we can be of some value to them, whether they will get something out of participating in this network of conversations that will, happen in the future, starting with today.
True. No, I think you certainly have an uphill challenge, but I think it's a deeply committed pursuit and endeavor. But when you mentioned young people and the fact that we have so many young people, one of your talks I happened to listen to said, "Are we reaping the demographic dividend?" Do you think we are? Because on the one hand, we have so many more men in the country than women, and we tend to mostly choose engineering and the sciences and more of these very technical fields, computer science, computer engineering, and all of those kinds of things. Are we producing more wet robots rather than thinking people? And how do you plan to correct this in any way through the Aspen's efforts?
Okay, we are not reaping the demographic dividend. Right now, we are on a path of reaping a demographic disaster. Okay, but there are some silver linings which are important. I feel, and I experienced this in CII, which I led for 30 years, that more and more women have to take leadership. In
Hmm.
CII, there was a time when several of our key international offices, USA, UK, Singapore, were all headed by women. Several national and regional activities were headed by women. And it was not easy to do this because the men were resistant to this.
Hmm.
So there was a process of getting the men to
Hmm.
accept this, accept the women as equal colleagues, not as subordinates, and by the way, sometimes as bosses. Yeah, but it happened eventually, but it
Hmm.
was not easy.
Hmm.
And as we took, one of the very important decisions was to have a woman as a CEO of Aspen
Hmm.
India, as
Hmm.
part of practicing what we preach, that
Right.
we have to go down this road. And by the way, in the service sector, in institutions, in service industries, women are generally better than men in the work that they do. We
Hmm.
found very high values, strong commitment,
Hmm.
and less ego. So these have been
Certainly.
very important qualities in bringing women into the fold. The other thing, Jerry, that we're working at is seeing that just as a school must be local for a child, same from a seamless transition for children from school to vocational training, skill centers must also be local.
Hmm.
And so that you don't have to, you go to a school in somewhere in the rural areas, you should, if you don't want to go to college, but you want to have some training in a particular vocation, you can get it right there and then. And that's something we are working at. And a lot of these will happen with corporate partnerships. So it'll be public-private partnerships in vocational training centers around the country.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So I think I'm just going to ask you to re-enumerate some of the courses that the Aspen Institute provides for those who are listening and those who might be interested in researching and looking up if it's relevant to them. And you mentioned there are different age brackets that might also be included. So please.
So Jerry, there's this executive seminar which we have for the older people, which is a 4 to 5 day residential program. It is focused again on leadership with values for the older people. We encourage spouses to also either be active participants or to be observers, so that the family actually gets something out of it. It's not just one guy going off for 4 or 5 days and people at home wondering what the hell is he up to or what is she up to.
Right.
So there's a kind of an integrated approach to this. The second is the Young Leaders Program, which is ongoing now. We are in our 4th class, and we are planning to expand that. As I mentioned earlier, each class can only be 20 people. And the third level is the school program for school leavers in the last few years of school. So this is 3 levels of leadership programs that we are doing, and this is only the beginning. We hope to, modify, change things as we learn, and go on to doing much more as we build capacity.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Das, for that. And I think I'm just going to call this Google Hangout to a close. And if I think one of the things I can take away is that you've made it very clear the importance of values in day-to-day life, whether it be in business or at work. So I think that's a very good lesson to take away from this. And thank you so much, Mr. Das, for your time and for bearing with all the glitches that we've had.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. Good talking to you. And
good talking to you too.
All the best.
You too. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.